Greetings, family. This is Terry Rigg, Mr. Riggs, UK tour guide to the rest of the world. This is Black Eyes TV once again with a dynamic Afro. I don't even know what to mention. But you know what? This is about the link up, about connecting, crossing the bridges, building the bridges, doing what we need to do. As you know, this is the UK Jamaica link up. And as we have in the building, we have two big guns in the house. And before I go ahead, I'm going to bring in my co-host, Mr. Rich. Mr. Rich, are you there? As he's not talking at this precise moment. I'm going to pass it on to my brother, Dean Oki. Introduce yourself, tell him what you're about.
Yes, sir. So I'm Dean OKAI, the founder of ADPAC, adpac.net. So we are a lobbying and advocacy organization. And what we do as part of that is create a leadership program working between our youth mentoring and rites of passage organizations. And then at the tail end of that is provide a legacy program called the Managed Leadership Program that runs from 18 to 24. So part of what we'll be talking about today is the international exchange, which you, Mr. Riggs, are part of the initiative, and how we are creating a pathway into industry from education for our young people. This is part of an ADPAC initiative called Schools to Industry Pipeline. And we're raising funds around this right now so that we can coordinate all of the youth engagements, all of the grassroots youth engagement organizations, so that we circumvent exactly what's been happening with our young people in terms of them being able to slip through the cracks. What we want to do is be able to provide a wraparound care so that our young people can't fall. We're going to catch them wherever they are.
Okay. So now, in our special guest in the house for this week, we have someone straight from Jamaica. I would like him to introduce himself and give us a little bit of information about himself as I bring him in. Yes, my brother.
Blessing, my brother. First of all, I'd like to say, in the presence of the supreme creator of heaven and earth, that created the first man and woman on our great continent, Mother Africa, Ethiopian African. Blessings to our children, both at home and abroad. I am Ras Ho-Shing, Paulus. I'm an Ethiopian, Orthodox, Tewahedo Christian. I follow the same faith as His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie. I'm also a representative of the African Union. I'm also a representative of the National Council of Reparation here in the Caribbean. I'm also a representative of the ancient order of Rastafari that comprises of the different mansions from Nyabingi, Baba Shanti, all the great mansions that came out of the philosophy and teaching of His Imperial Majesty. So this is Ras Ho-Shing, my brother, and it is a wonderful moment for we that we're now joining hands, not just across the Caribbean, not just across the Atlantic Ocean, but the diaspora is now responding to the call of Mother Africa. Africa is calling. So blessed love, my brothers.
Peace. Now, as we are in the house today, I just want us to just give us a little insight in what's happening in Jamaica today.
Well, what is happening in Jamaica today is no different to what is happening to all areas where African are inhabited. You know, Jamaica, we have been under the enslavement. You know, we are independent, but we still follow the Constitution of the Queen of England, which means that we're still subject matter. We're still referred to as cattle, bonding slavery. You know, that is the real reality of Jamaica. And as you know, we are currently confronted with the Chinese takeover. We are seeing all our commercial zone being inhabited and possessed by the dragon, as we refer to him, because we see that our government, we need to hold them accountable, because right now, unless we put to stop, if we do not take action immediately, right, the voice of Africa, this wonderful land that the world knows to be as Jamaica and the significance of it, we have been the voice, the heartbeat of Africa throughout the darkest ages of African enslavement, as you know. So we cannot afford for Jamaica to subjugate it. We cannot afford for Jamaica to come under the rule of the dragon. We cannot afford that. And as you know, Jamaica are a peculiar people. You know, the peculiarity of our nation that has the mixture of the great kings and warriors of Africa, the great Ashantis, right through the West Coast, African kingdom. We know who Jamaicans are, and we know where they all came from. So right now, my friend, we have a situation that we now need to deal with, because Jamaica now needs to abandon the Queen Constitution and become a republic in order for us to take our position on the African Union. So the same problems that you confront in England is the same problems that we in Jamaica, the majority, is confronting here, only under a more draconian environment that is more draconian than what you're experiencing in England and in the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Brother Rich, can you speak? Are you there? Okay. So Dean, in crossing that bridge between us in the UK, crossing to...
Yeah, I'm trying to, but I'm having a bit of reception problem right now. Give me a second and I'll be back in.
Okay. So yeah, in the perspective of crossing that bridge to Jamaica, and what can we able to form a form of an exchange, as we would talk about exchange programs in different formats? What can we give to offer, and what can we can see from what he has told us so far?
So just from my brother Ras Ho-Shing's explanation, we see what our global, as a global African diaspora, we experience the same challenge, and that's a lack of sovereignty. If you don't govern your own determination and you don't control your own currency and have the freedom of communication, economic movement, and the freedom of physical movement, you're not a sovereign. So the first challenge is that as men whom I call custodians, we must establish the sovereignty of ourselves and then create the mass adoption of that for those who desire to lead our people. And then our people have options whether to adopt those sovereign principles and tactics themselves. So this starts with operating any institutions we create in trust, because they lie outside of national legislation. Then we need not concern ourselves with any heads of state, and we can do away with that. In 12 days' time, we have our cryptocurrency, the Sable Ascent coin. So there's no need for us to even engage with banking institutions again, because the minute that we adopt the cryptocurrency wallet, we have complete freedom of money movement. So Europeans have always had freedom of money movement. And we're not talking about the great unwashed now. We're talking about your 5% who are really operators in the world. So when England came out of the Second World War and empire was completely obliterated, and we're talking about the real ability for vampirism was obliterated, what they did was they established offshore banking in the islands. Now, those offshore banking venues operated for what we call off-ledger banking, and that's where they did all their money laundering. This is why the City of London is a completely sovereign jurisdiction within Great Britain. City of London isn't part of England, which is why it has its own police, its own laws, its own ambulance service, and everything else. So once we understand the structures of sovereign jurisdiction, we can duplicate anything. This is why, as part of the infrastructure of ADPAC, we have our sovereign underwriter, because everything that we're doing moving forward is in sovereign trust. All of our directors and trustees have the opportunity to become sovereigns. That means you jump out of being a citizen, which is an indentured servant. And that's when we address your straw man, which means that you no longer pay tax and you no longer take part in the laws of the land. So we're not talking about murder, rape, or anything heinous. We are talking about the civil vampirism that the state takes part with you. Now, ADPAC's role is to share these tactics and strategies and put them in place globally for us, who are a network of custodians, so that we can perform our custodian duties within what we do.
Okay. So, Ras, in what Dean has said, what can you feel that you can build upon that from the direction of going into Jamaica before we even talk about Ethiopia?
All right. What our brother just said is perfect. In fact, he's the first one that has brought the full reality, right, of the sovereign rights of the African Ethiopian. You see, because of miseducation, because of misunderstanding, when the Ethiopian World Federation was sent out to the West for African liberation, that was our sovereign rights. That gave us the opportunity to claim our sovereign rights. And if many of us was to revisit the principle of the Ethiopian World Federation, which was a sovereign constituted institution that was sent to the West to liberate our African people that was enslaved in all different forms, styles, and fashion. So that, what he said, is perfect. The sovereignty of the African continent always came from the Upper Nile Valley. If you go to the history of the continent, all the great kingdom were all interlinked right up back to Upper Kemet, which is present-day Ethiopia. So where Jamaica is concerned, my brother, as you know, our history of our position concerning African unity and liberation is second to none in the 21st century. So when we call upon our people, we're not just calling upon Jamaicans who is abroad, which we have over 5 million Jamaicans that has traveled all over, but we are also calling on all African, because we, right here in the Caribbean, as being the shining torch for Africa freedom and Africa liberation. And within us, through the revelation of the Rastafarian movement that was so enlightened through the philosophy and teaching of His Imperial Majesty, we always knew that reparation was a distraction and repatriation was only the solution. And what we've been waiting is for the diaspora to come to that position, because when it comes to Africa development, between the Caribbean and the continent, we already have that plan when we revisit, right, first the Constitution of His Imperial Majesty. I would love my African brother go into your smartphone and revisit the Constitution of His Imperial Majesty, and you will see for yourself. It encompasses every state of Africa, which is called an empire. I want my brothers to revisit the Organization of African Union, and what you'll see in the presentation, the foundation principality, the unity that was required for Africa, you'll find that we've already penned it. What is now needed is for us to revisit these great institutions, knowing that the African Union today in its presentation, without we strengthening the administrationship of it, it will always be undermined, just as our beloved sister, Dr. Arikana, has revealed to us. And we are now coming together, which is, it's not a problem. There's no difficulty. When Africa comes together, my friend, and what we're seeing without apology, right? The death of George Floyd, right? As you can see, is not because that is just another death. Yes, is that because it's 400 years, my friend. And what we saw on that situation with the world to see is that the black man life, the bread, God-living bread that was given to him, was taken away in front of the audience of the international world. So you see, my brother, you know, it always takes a final straw, a final action. And what we're seeing, the responding of all the African community right across the America, right across Europe. You know, my brother, we know that African unity was always a reality, and it was only a time within time for we to physically see the sins of Europeans. We don't need to go further in their history. No, we don't. All we need to do, my brother, is return to Africa, return to the principles of our founding father. And remember this, Africa is a spiritual nation, and every spirit must have a definition to it. And in the courses of Africa civilization, many of our people practice what we call anti-godliness in their ways of worshiping. So when we speak of a definition of our spirituality in the 21st century, I can challenge any nation, including my brothers and sisters in Africa, show me a spiritual revelation that is greater, that came out of Holy Mount Zion, that presents itself today as the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo, the Church of the Most High. Look to Ethiopia, and we have the solutions.
Okay. In understanding that, Dean, in looking at that perspective, in forms of the sovereignty, as we was explaining, in bridging that gap, let's start from the youth, because that's the most vital part, that how we have to build a foundation and a legacy for our children. Now,
absolutely,
in what he has said is, how are we going to begin to making these moves? Because, you know, a lot of people say we talk too much, or we do this and we do that, but in forms of action, what can we explain to Ras in what we have in a form of a foundation so far?
Well, first, I'll just frame it in terms of sovereignty before I go into the what we are all well aware should be the universal adoption for all of our children. So in terms of sovereignty, as you look to the States now, and even before we saw the polarization of the murder of our brother and cousin, George Floyd, we saw the NFAC. Now, the NFAC is a highly trained, heavily disciplined, and heavily armed African-American militia. We must understand that security and the provision of security for our people is paramount, and our security has to grow at the same rate as our influence and our economics. So wherever globally we see these tenets of what we need to act as a sovereign nation, wherever we are as a diasporan people, we must bring them into the fold and align our values. And we've heard and seen that our spiritual values are aligned, that our ethical values are aligned as Pan-Africanists. And then we have to ascertain that they are the spear, the tip of the spear. So when we see that, you imagine that all governments in Western worlds have had the intervention of shadow government. And you ask yourself, why would those nations put up with shadow government? For 1 second, why would the United States, for instance, put up with the CIA? Because it's politically expedient for the CIA to carry out what is beneficial for the American government to get done. And they have plausible deniability. Now, they also act in trust, and they're not audited, and they're self-sustaining, although they do draw economic provision from the nation. Now, if we are custodians and Pan-African custodians, we must have a trust that also includes physical security as well as our data and communication security to protect our people. And that we must be able to train them to be highly effective in terms of intelligence, highly disciplined in terms of the way they conduct themselves and their morals and principles, and highly armed in order to protect our people globally. So I make mention of this just to give a background, because when we talk about leadership, there are many facets of leadership. You have leadership within corporations, you have leadership in terms of organizations that are gonna be able to deal with philanthropy. You have leadership of institutions such as the medical, the educational, and what we desire to do is compartmentalize them. So within that framework, when we're talking about youth, rites of passage gives a standard definition of what an African youth is, and it delivers code, and it offers a high cultural self-esteem to our children, irrespective of what nation they're in, irrespective of what racism they experience. They're already embedded with a high cultural self-esteem. Now, when they graduate from that, like the Yiddishers do from their bar mitzvah, they're introduced to their community. This is where we introduce them to mentors. This is when we start to look at their career aspirations, and we create the pathways into industry. Now, at the tail end of that, for those who are really looking to become leaders, this is what the Manage program is for. And that's where we create the international exchange. In fact, the international exchange is happening all the way through. And that could be Ghana, that could be the Congo or Jamaica, because they're gathering the international experience, so they know how to conduct themselves globally. They know that as Africans, they can go and play Spot the European whenever they travel, and it gives them a greater mental context of who they are in the world. The Manage program specifically is to induct them into a society, which is a Garvey society, which has an alumni of 10 men or 10 women, who will then go out and do our work in the world. Now, they might be in any form of government. And we mentioned working with governments, but to be fair, most of our governments, be they in the Caribbean or in Africa, have been interrupted by the Scottish Rite Lodge or Freemasonry. Now, I happen to belong to the United Order of Mechanics, which is an African lodge. So it's your God versus my God. we don't need to necessarily engage with government as we engage businesses and we create freedom of money movement through our vehicle in the Sable Ascent coin and our movement of trade within trusts, because those nations benefit. And when we have a philanthropic mentality, the minute that we create entities such as sovereign trusts, we are already seeking to give back in a charitable way in any country that we're in. Now, that may involve hospital infrastructure, and we're not coming like the Chinese because it's not a loan and there's no terms and conditions. And the leaders of said nations get to deliver those entities such as hospitals, schools, tech universities, and who are seen to be the champions to their people. So does it benefit them to work with a trust who are sovereign, as I said? It makes it politically expedient for them to achieve what they desire to but aren't capable of.
Okay. Russ, could you see on your side of Jamaica in what Dean has said so far?
No, everything what he says is relevant, because you see, what must now happen? We don't need to go through the history. We don't need to say the great kingdoms that we've built. We do not need to defend who we are or where we came from. What we now need to do now, my brother, is to come together in order for now to determine our own present so that we can secure our future. And what must happen? The diaspora, as you know, many may not have the knowledge. I was one with the great elders of the Rastafarian movement, which consists of Ras Shaggy Berry, Martimo Planner, Ras Kojo, all the great elders, Bunga Ken, Bunga Tani. I can go on and on and on of the names in reference to, right? And what you'll find, my brother, is that what we had declared then concerning the 6th region, up until then, there wasn't a 6th region for African development. There was only 5 regions. It was after global reason of 2003 that the Rastafarian gathered here in Jamaica at the university, and the 53 recommendation that collectively came out of that reasoning that brought the message and the whole works into the African continent to recognize the 6th region, which we told them it is the African diaspora region, which has now become the 6th region of African development. Now that we've determined that reality, the importance of the diaspora to Africa development, it is incumbent upon ourselves that we return as a united front both in our interpretation of our spirituality, which means that we must engage, right, with the Ethiopian Orthodox Tehido. We must engage with the African Union. We must engage with all local governments within the respective region, including the Caribbean, Jamaica, right into the continent, because Africa is moving, my brother. And the diaspora cannot be effective as a splintered unit. So it is most important that our medical doctors, our scientists, they are now coming together, creating their platform and also connecting to the African doctors and scientists. Our administrators must now do the similar thing. So whatever facet that we are agitating for, we must now join hands, my brother. Every organization, from the Nation of Islam to the Pan-African, to the, you name, every African movement that has come out of the diaspora, all of us now must come together, and we have the opportunity to do that, because our impact on the continent must be a defining one that is going to change the course of our history. It must be an impact that will take away the divide, the division of tribal practices, tribal ways, personal pettiness. Because we, the African in the diaspora, as you know, my brother, because we all suffered the same injustices, indignities, because we all suffer everything that the American African, when I was in England, it was the Sus Law. They butchered us with many great academia, young men that was rising, were given prison sentences, as you know, in England because of the Sus Law. So when we see how much throughout the European nation, how much it is being ingrained against the black man, and now that we know why, because without we, you couldn't have a kingdom, you couldn't have a civilization, you couldn't be here in the 21st century. So long as you keep eye down, you will continue enjoying the luxury. Not only do you suck the resources of Africa, you also drink the blood of the African children. And we now know you. We know you. We know who is the beast. We know who is the dragon. And we also know who is the false prophet. Believe you me, we know the trinity of evil that came against Africa and continue. So my beloved brother, everything that the brother says is consistent. Every group, so long as you're an African, must come together. The family is now calling for the present and the future preservation of the African race, my friend. That is where it's come to now. And if we cannot see, as what Marcus prophesied and told we, until the black man back against the wall, that is when the black man will realize the fullness of himself. And if we cannot see without apology how much the black man back is against the wall, that even in our own country, we are second class, third class citizens. We have no access to our own provision. So my brother, the only solution, as what the Rastaman said in the day one, repatriation, because we need to be back in the respective region of our land. And as what the brother said, in Jamaica, 44% of our Jamaican people came from what is modern Nigeria region. So all across that region. 33% come from Ghana. That is why Jamaica, Ghana, Nigeria, if you look at Jamaican, you cannot separate them. If you look at Ghanaians and you look at the Nigerians. And that's a fact. And the rest of our people came from other areas of Africa, which included Ethiopia. So without apology, we know that it was the west coast of Africa, because the north coast was already enslaved by the Arabians that came in thousands of years ago. That is why we had to give up Egypt as a ransom, Lower Kemet. A lot of people do not know how to connect the dots, my brother. But we have the dots. We have the dots between we in the Caribbean and Ethiopia. We have the history of every civilization, whether from his formative position as a primitive man, a Neanderthal, or whether he was Homo erectus, occupying the continent which you call Asia. We know all of their beginning. That is why the lion can only be found in the continent of Africa. So who am I calling on? The lions, the young lions, the African lions. We know who are the lions. The lions can't change, just like a leopard cannot change its spot. Well, that was the one we're calling on, the lions. And lion only resides in Africa. Anywhere you see a lion, he has to be in some incarceration, he has to be in some stew. But the lion roams only the continent of Africa. And the lions are ready, my brother. And believe you me, the lion slays the beast. and the lion slays the dragon. Our spirituality is a mystic to all nations, my brother. Our spirituality has no end, it has no depths, it has no heights to it. The African spirituality, when it is connected to the divine one that came down the Nile Valley, look at Ethiopia, never conquered, never under subjugated. From beginning of our empire, Upper Kemet, we've never been conquered by no nation, my brother. So you see, as what His Majesty said, the solution is in Africa. And when righteous Africans come together, that is the simplicity, the mystic of the African true spirituality of what we can accomplish, my friend. And everything what the brother is saying, that's what has to happen. We now need to have exchange. We now to bring our youths into the Caribbean so that they can see our children, how we school them, and the type of education that we're now presently administrating here in the Caribbean. Because as you know, a lot is happening. And Jamaica has been very consistent when it comes right now. The Center for Reparation Research that is headed by one of our great Professor Vernon Shepherd, and some great historian. The sole purpose of that institution is to go into all the historical avenues that exists regarding the enslavement of the African. Every family that can be traced, that continue to profit, like Mr. Cameron, your ex-Prime Minister of England, who was one of the big slave plantation owners. So every corruption, my friend, and every sin of the plantocracy class who call themselves the European class, we shall expose all of you. We have the history. Is one thing about the British. They kept such wonderful logs. Yes, they did. So it's not hard for us to find it. And believe you me, my brothers, we have found every missing pieces of their evil, of what they did to our people.
Okay. Brother Rich,
all right.
Brother Rich, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I had to move the whole setup. Reception's a bit of a problem today. I'm loving the talks. People, if you're feeling what's been said so far, smash that like button, please, yeah? Show some appreciation. Take in what the brothers are saying, because it's real talks. It's inspirational. But again, we're providing you with real plan, real-time action of what to do and how to do it, and the mind state that you need to do it. So, you know, at this point, I don't have no questions. Just hit that like button. I want to continue the conversation. I don't want to break down the bill too much. I just want to continue on the pathway of how we can link up from the UK to the Caribbean in this case and make that situation more concrete.
Okay. Yeah. So Ras, we was talking the other day about the highlight of the youth in Jamaica. I just want you to break it down to the people to explain how the youth are progressing on a rapid stage within Jamaica itself.
Well, as we said, because Jamaica is predominantly African, and because of our position and our history and what we've done concerning liberation and to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, Jamaica has been very, very, very diligent throughout our schooling. And in the recent 10 years, we have seen a transformation that our youths are now writing African history. Our youths are no longer saying, I'm not an African. You know, our youth, and that is the most wonderful signs that when we look right across the borders, it's the young African man, male and female. They're the ones who's coming out, right? They're the ones they're seeing. And Jamaica is no different, because our faculty in our institution, as you know, you've heard that Jamaica translated the Holy Bible in Patois, right? These things, Patois is now accepted as our first language, because it has so many adjectives that can be found in the original African from the west coast of Africa. So they start to realize that the great African mind again created another language between us that derived from our ancient tongue, but that also we also brought in some mixture from the so-called enslaver. But yet they still couldn't understand, because it was we who created it for ourselves, so that we could have one common language across the Africans that was brought into enslavement. So patois has become, you know, one time it was used to say you talk pat if you talk patois, but now all the professors, all our children, so English is now seen as a second language, no longer the Queen of England first language. Patois has now come in. So that alone has shown you the changes that is currently happening. And with, of course, the reparation movement that has now happened throughout the Caribbean, because a lot of people down out there may not be aware that every state within the Caribbean region that was under the enslavement and the atrocity of the enslavers, European, they've all got their own account, their own historical document, what the Spanish did, what the Portuguese did, what the French did, what the British certainly did. So you see, each region has the full history, all right? Not only the history, but also the descendants of all those atrocities. We now have the full history of them, both in our respective regions. And what we're now doing is coming together collectively, because we all suffer the same sin. You've also heard that we now have a Caribbean Court of Justice, which consists of all the CARICOM region. And obviously, when you deal with the CARICOM region, whether you're an African or a red man, you know, the European came most viciously and took their land and took our land. So we and the Red Indians in the Caribbean, we have a very similar history and very, very close, as you know. So within that respect, we're now going to hold accountable. I have asked, as a member of the National Council of Reparation, that is currently submitting a document to the Privy Council, which was penned by one of our great elders, Frank Phipps, that is well presented, that document, the whole enslavement and the whole reality of it, right? We are now getting ready, right, to engage the rest of the Caribbean region. We're now getting ready to bring the final course of the courses towards the enslavement, right? Not only to the Privy Council, but to the Caribbean Court of Justice, because as you know, the European will never give us justice, my brother. The whole institution of the law courts of European, the QC Council that operates the most draconian law of the plantocracy, the so-called worshippers of Satan, we will never seek no justice. See, we have to claim our justice, my brother. And it's only we ourselves can claim our justice. So you see, the Rasta man once told me, the great elders, that when it comes to the final severing our ties with Europe, we must show them all the sins that they have done. We must have it properly tabulated so that one doesn't think we're just talking. So we're going to show you, all of you European people, what your so-called founding masters, founding leaders have done, and how you all these years have kept silent because you all profited from the wealth of the African. But now that you know, my brother, we are going to return now and possess our land. And we know that Jamaica plays a very important key. So we know that Jamaica is the gateway, not Ghana. When you're in Ghana, you're on my doorstep. Jamaica is the gateway to the African continent. The Middle Passage is the shortest distance. And within that corridor, there's millions of our African that was brought over through the Atlantic slave trade that was thrown overboard, millions of them. So the atonement of the African nation, it is important that we have access to the Middle Passage. And it is important that Jamaica, the gateway, is secured. So we are expecting Jamaica to have a referendum and to declare a republic, right? And declare their position on the African Union, because that's the only course of action that is left for the black man, both at home and abroad. We now have to go and repossess control of our land, our institutions, our scientific, medical, our spiritual definition. We, the diaspora, we have it in us to do that. And when you say how we coming together, many of you came from Jamaica, so we are already one. What needed to happen, my friend? There's always been said that prophecies and revelation, you see, many of our people mistakenly think the enslaved Bible of the white supremacist, the devil, was the same as the Holy Bible. No, they're two different Bibles, my brother. And if you look into the Holy Bible, no matter what translation and how it is being written, whether King James authorized it or whatever, you will see the essence of the story. Only the black man fits into it. So that means that prophecies and liberation, right down to the final second, had to be fulfilled. Yes, it had to be fulfilled. And we're now in that new dispensation where Africa must belong to the black man. And that, you know, without apology. One thing I will tell you, you see the time that we're in? We're in the time of what we call the 2012 revelation. A lot of people don't understand why the world follow 2,000 years calendar when humanity is thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years in creation. The reason why, as an Ethiopian, that is the revelation of Jesus Christus. And it was at the age of 12 that the Christ revealed to all nations, both the Roman and the Grecian, both the Arabians and the East and the Eastern that were all gathered in Jerusalem. It was the age of 12 that our Christ revealed. So when we speak of 2012, of the Ethiopian calendar, what we know is that the sins of man is now come to an end. Earth rightful rulers are now going to rule this land once again. So all who doesn't understand the 2012 revelation, look to Ethiopia. I don't need to teach you. It's all there for you to see. And I can say this, we're in the 2012 calendar. We're coming up to the last quarter. From September 11th, 2019, the 2012 revelation came in. And if you was to check that period of time, the acceleration and the amount of things that has been exposed. But there's one thing that the earth is forgetting. There's also going to be the SUN burning. So in this dispensation, you're going to experience, this earth is going to experience a summer that it has never had before, my friend. And all of ones are going to see many disasters coming up to September of this year, my friend. That is when our 2012 calendar ends its revelation, and there's a new dispensation when earth rightful ruler are now stretching out their hands. Just as how you see that every leader in Africa, including the corrupt one, they're now going to be held accountable, my brother. every rulers in our continent are going to now be held accountable. And we are going to abandon the constitution of the European, because there's no other courses of action that we can take. We first have got to abandon and get rid of the Draconian rule of the European Constitution in order for Africa to come together. So that is number one priority. Abandon the constitution of our enslaver. And Jamaica must take a position. That's what we know, my friend.
Okay. That's been very powerful and giving us that info. Dean, on the reflection of it, what can you say to that?
Well, I'm very warm to hear about the Center for Reparations and that all of the respective CARICOM partners are communicating. What we're doing here is in the back end of ADPAC is applying the digital tools like the CRM tools to connect everybody so that we can share information in one central digital space that we control that can't be infiltrated. And when everything is digitized, that they have all of the materials, and then any one of those custodians can share information, compare information. You can then move as a cabal that bring a joint civil litigation against them. Now, when you do that in trust, and you said the most beautiful thing, that you've prepared the Caribbean Court of Justice, that within its own sovereign jurisdiction is what we've been missing. We are going to European courts to challenge them within their own interests, which makes no sense. You must have a repertory courts of justice, which is an African repertory courts of justice. So
you must.
Let's take recent history. If you looked at what the Jews did after Britain used their military terrorist tactics to make Palestine Israel, and then went assigned them the land, even though their first prime minister cancelled a few contracts in the King David Hotel to expedite the process. Irrespective of this, they set up their own courts, and within those repertory courts, what they would do is kidnap those criminals to bring them to justice. Now, the world saw this as just. Now, if you have your own repertory courts of justice, your own military and intelligence personnel are perfectly within their rights to go and apprehend criminals who have murdered, plundered, and stolen from you. This is just international law as it stands at present. So if you look at anybody, any African leader, there's no African leader that took a flight to The Hague because he had a warrant and said, let me come in and check myself in at the desk. And that makes no sense. It's a repertory courts of justice set up by men of a similar ilk with a particular will. And we are capable of doing exactly the same. So once we establish those sovereign jurisdictions and grant ourselves the license for our repertory courts of justice, well, then we have the private security who go and apprehend the criminals. Now, when you apprehend the criminals, it's up to you to extrapolate the wealth from those who have stolen it from you. This is where the reparations comes into play.
Exactly.
We are responsible for our portion of reparations, which is the psychological and spiritual reparations. Now, one of the things that ADPAC is doing, and we had a meeting last Friday with the British Board of Black Psychologists, is to introduce African-centered psychology, which always recognizes the spirit. So for any European psychologists, this is Jung versus Freud. Jung recognized the consciousness of the spirit, and Freud merely recognized the intellect of the mind. It's like when a man tell you no, you know intellectually. When I say I know for practice. No. So We are working with them and are building a relationship now. And the framework of that will be to deliver out our mental and spiritual reparations. And along in line with the distance learning tools that we're creating with the ADPAC, we're going to be creating video portals where you can see all of this and it sinks in. I taught myself web and graphic design 15 years ago from YouTube. Distance learning tools, distance healing tools, and then you have the psychologists on the ground who can also learn to be facilitators from those distance learning tools. But what we start to do is create a structured framework in which to give our people the spiritual and psychological medicine that we've been missing. And as it's been recognized by African psychologists, it's merely an operating system. So if you imagine that most of us are operating from a virus, it's about replacing that virus, applying the antivirus, and being able to get a clean CPU so that we operate at an optimum level. We're done.
My brother, you are well studied. Everything you say, we are in full agreement with it. Now that we have the technology, we're able to come together quite easily. And where the African development is concerned, I can confidently tell all of you, we already have the framework that will guide us so that we can come together with one plan, not splintered group any longer, but with one plan that represents the 6th region that we call the African Diaspora region. That is where we want to go to. We want to now sit with you, engage you with the National Council of Reparation, engage you with our Youth Council. We now need to link. And when we find strength links, my brother, strength link is not a weak link, right? And we know, you see, you have so much explanation and everything that you've said is correct. One thing I must remind all of us, that the Ethiopian World Federation is not a defunct body. It's only defunct because our people didn't recognize the reality of it, that is only from a sovereign position you are able to confront these so-called sovereign rulers of Europe to give up my people and pay back what is due to it. You know that. I know that. Well, you see, when we look at everything concerning Africa development, the OAU, the African Union, the Organization of African Unity, that has become the African Union, we have the fundamental principles, the fundamental rights of what Africa development, unity, how it should be. So all we have to do is to re-examine. Let us see where we are in the 21st century. What of the objective have we accomplished? You see, a lot of people keep on thinking that Bob Marley wrote the lyrics for war. No. That was a speech of His Imperial Majesty. Yeah. And if you play it and listen to it, it tells you then what was the process that was going to bring Africa to an African Union position, one continent, one empire. So you know, do not think that we need to reinvent the wheel. No, what we're now doing is fulfilling, because we now have all the technology and we now have all the evidence and the history of the sins of the European. And do not think it's just him. He is just the beast. He was just used by the dragon to do all the sins that they've been doing and gathering information and bringing it back to the dragon. See, a lot of people must ask themselves this question. If the European so-called white supremacists was so different to the so-called red dragon, why is it that throughout the history, you always have Chinatown in the most expensive real estate area of your town, right in the West End of London, Chinatown? How long you been there? So how long has the dragon been in power and the beast? How long has Hong Kong been a partnership between Red China and the so-called imperialist government of Europe? How long have they been in? What have you done over 100 years? Do you know what can be done over 100 years, my brother? Well, the present situation that we're confronted with, it was the beast that brought back all secrets to the dragon, that today we know him as the Red China. And there's no other nation that has revealed himself in all of his cultural exposition as being the dragon that is ruled by a dragon. Do you know the nature of the dragon, my brothers? It makes the beast looks like an angel. Yeah, what? The nature of the dragon, because the beast, because he has no intellectual knowledge, we're able to turn him, just as how we've done with the European man. But you see, the dragon that comes from anciency, his civilization goes over 5,000 years of ancient Babylonians. We know who the dragon is. And so long we know how to deal with the dragon, don't we? So that's another area of the Chinese takeover that we will address in another discussion. But right now, all we are concentrating on, my brother, is we ourselves coming together, because we know that when we come together, there's no nation and there's no weapons that can come against me. You hear me? So the most important thing now is the unity of Africa. And the diaspora plays the last key. We have it in us. So we must make sure that what we do, it is right and it is just. And that's another thing, my brother. So what else can we say? We're ready to go. We're ready to go.
You know, there's the lessons, the caveat that I throw in is the lessons to be learned, because remember, this is like the end of the Matrix, where we are not the first. And although we represent the many, the concept of the Neo who has been here in Kwame Nkrumah, I look at the nature of academics as opposed to those who are practically encumbered with lived experience. And I learned the lessons from the academics who didn't see the nature of the dragons and the empire that was coming, because they took men at their word. Me, I'm a pragmatist and I'm extremely experienced. I have been in business for 25 years and there's no form of 419 that hasn't been tried. There's no form of physical attempt that hasn't been tried. And based on this, I am my brothers of what I call risk assessment. So where we live today is that we are aware at the many tactics they use to infiltrate us. Number one, their word means nothing. So we have countermeasure, and countermeasure again. What we must establish, will establish, is an intelligence service that is highly covert because it protects our interests. And that goes into every area that their intelligence services go and will supersede that. Another myth that we have and we keep professing is that we all have to come together. If they had recognized at that time that all they needed was a critical mass of states to start, look at the fallacy of this ECOWAS. If these nations had got together and back to cryptocurrency, I said, let go there, just leave the whole thing. Nothing has to peg on anything. We could back a cryptocurrency, and based on the resources in the ground and the geological studies of those crypto resources, we will put them into a management trust that acts as a sovereign wealth trust on behalf of the 8 nations here. We don't have to dig up a ass. We don't dig up one diamond, not one piece of gold. We don't cut one piece of timber. We don't mine one piece of tin. And just based on the geological studies, we will create the liquidity from their worth and release it through our cryptocurrency. European relationship done. And you don't need 54 states of Africa for that. Because by the demonstration of even 6, you have now effectively demonstrated sovereignty with a cryptocurrency based on their own blockchain, which they can build in their own nations, that cannot be purchased and dumped on the open market to manipulate the value of the money. Now, because I did mention that our leaders have been interrupted by the Scottish Rite as a Freemasonic lodge and not African Masonry, I doubt them a deal with. We are merely looking at, just like the left and the right of the Democrats and Republicans and Labour and Conservative of the same body. When you look at these leaders, they are merely the fingertips of these hands. And they are useless to us as a people. So the entities that you talk about us establishing and bringing through the 6th region, let's just look at this. If we call out what the African diaspora looks like, 54 million in North America, 130 million in South America, 13 million in Europe, 1.3 billion in Africa, 2.5 million in Asia, 243,000 in Australia, and 11.6 million in the Caribbean. Imagine that the African diaspora region establishes an African diaspora development bank, where every single one of those civilians understands they can safely deposit their funds for their repatriation to Africa, to invest in Africa, where they know they're going to be able to purchase land once through a particular pathway and facility. Very quickly, that fiat currency wealth vastly outweighs what anybody from Russia, China is going to offer to those nations on terms. And he who pays the piper calls the tune. So even just based on the philanthropy of offering each of those member states their institutional buildings, hospitals, schools, universities, day centers, the mobile hospitals in trucks to go into the rural areas, the manufacturing plants. It is an irresistible proposition. And that is for that reason that I said our security must grow at the same rate as our influence and our economics and our intelligence.
Everything you've said so far is so consistent, right? Security is a must. As you know, Ethiopia, right, relied on our security, right? Not just spirituality, but the physical as well, because your spirituality is what gives you the strength in order for you to secure your people. So the whole intelligence, what you said earlier regarding some of the militia groups which I'm now seeing in America, which we're now in contact with and all over, you know, we do one thing we recognize is that within the American, remember, it was the American blacks that were used in all the wars. They fought all the wars of the white man. In fact, we fought all the wars for them. But in concentrating on America, we have brothers and sisters that has been involved in every ministry of war in America. So, you know, when we speak of security and what we call modern technology in warfare, understanding the use of them, you know, we do have many of our American brothers that have experienced the front line of all their battlefields. So what you've said about our security is a must, because, you know, when you're looking now concerning and what you said, the African continent is able to have its own currency. We are able to create it, and it will be the most powerful currency on this planet, because no other nation, no other country has the wealth as we possess naturally in our resources, right? And as what you said, these things can be done. So it just shows you that there's no problem. There was a thing that used to say that we need money, we need dollars, and we need the Chinese yuan. No, we don't need none of that.
No, we don't.
Don't need none of that. What we need to do, as what is now happening, let us all, because you see, there is different groups of our people. There is those who wants to return home, and they know that it is a must. And there are those who are still wondering what is happening and what is going on. You understand? And there are those who still have this dream that they can live harmoniously, right, in their respective region, right? You know, we have nothing against them. No, we don't. But it's one thing I know, my friend, that my broadcast that I'm broadcasting with is to the brothers like myself, right? The brothers like Brother Riggs, right? And our other co-hosts, and all our brothers and sisters in America, Sister Ya, right? And others, right? Sister Shanice, right? Queen Empress Zadatu in England, who's been going on the continent, right? Bringing medicinal programs throughout every region. We must all come together now, my brother. Let us create a government within a government that has the connection in every area, right, of our African development, because we have the model. History is important, because through history, it can tell us of our successes and our failures. So history is important. And those of us who have been through our history, because many of us has, we are now into a position that we now want to present the one comprehensive action plan that will now impact upon the continent from Cape to Cairo. You understand me? That is what we are now wanting. That is what we're wanting. Anything else, we're not interested. Right? We're not interested. You know, those who want to remain, we have no problem. Those who want to be rehabilitated in the system that enslaved them, we have no problem either with that. But it's one thing we know, that the future of humanity is dependent on the righteous Africans come together. And any nation that wants to join the new dispensation of creation, they all have to come and join the righteous African. So when we are seeing European realizing the sins of their forefathers and what they themselves have been enjoying by keeping silent, and when you're seeing them coming out, yes, we appreciate, but we appreciate more when we hear the young African, male and female, talking about returning to the land, because no matter what happens, my friend, whether you want to remain in your respective region, the only way you're going to be accountable to any state that you're in is when Africa is united and stand as one So it is not just for me who desire and been living and the pursuit of it for 22 years with some of the great elders that has laid the foundation before us for us to be able to be on the right path towards African unity. That is why we can relate to the various institutions that I want my brothers to revisit. I want us to visit the OAU. I want us to visit the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo, the Upper Nile Valley. I want us to visit the Constitution of His Imperial Majesty, and let us see how much it reflects the position that we're in, and let us see what is needed in order to accomplish what we know the great African, the true liberators, have set for us to be able to take up the baton for African freedom and African liberty. That is where we are now, my friend, without apology, without any reference to anything else. Our unity is the saving grace of all humanity, and that without apology. We know that. They know that. And that's where we are, my brother. So you see, what else can stop us? Tell me, what else can stop us?
Nothing.
There you go, my brothers. And we're not saying this in a Dracolian manner. No, we are not. You see, when will our black people realize that they're the sons and daughters of the true living God? God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. The Trinity is one, one in three, three in one, the same one. Whether he's the creator of the universe, or whether he come in the flesh of man, or whether he's in the spirit that is sent in our mother's womb. It's the same divinity that we refer to, my brother.
100%.
What can stop you? What can stop us? Tell me.
There is nothing.
There's nothing, my friend.
If there's any questions in the chat room, if you want to ask any questions, please ask Soul, as we have about 15 minutes left. So, you know, give us some, ask some questions. Let's have a dialogue, and let's see where we're going with this, and able to build this bridge once again to make it a notorious, fantastic, beautiful bridge that we've been doing all for the past 1 hour and a bit. So, any questions? There is one question to Ras. Can you see it?
Let me put on. Let me see. Read it out for me.
It says, ask him for homeschooling growing in Jamaica. Do they have African-centered non-public schools?
Well, we have. Yes, we do. And as we said, we're not just changing it in small institution. Our curriculum is now being changed from a national position. And within the last 4 years, we have seen, right, a rising of the consciousness of our youths. Right, we're now seeing that, you know, the fruits, the bearing of the fruits of it. So it's not just, remember, Jamaica, a lot of people must remember that we are 95% Africans. So therefore, just as we heard that the history of Marcus Messiah Garvey, right, the great liberators, and one of the confusing history that we need to correct the narrative is the Maroon story, because when we speak about a Maroon, my brother, without apology, one does not change a name to a European one. One does not give up his position as a chief or a king and become a colonel unless he was a militia. The first one, right, that was loyal to the so-called British, because in every war that is fought against the British, he has to go and defend the British. Not only that, any runaways that run away, you had to go and run him down and bring him back to the planter. So how can that be? You know, the great Africans would not change his name. The great African would not succumb himself to a lowly position, right? So, you know, there's a lot of narrative that we ourselves have got to correct, because we of ourselves must also face certain dark truths that came out of our people. And that is a fact. But as we know, we have the history, you know, and if you go back into it, the great ones that fought against the Europeans, many of them, those that wasn't slaughtered and killed, they went back to Africa. They went back on the journey. One of the places that they went to was Sierra Leone. That is why you have Freetown, right? And if you go back to that history of it, you will see who was the great African fighters. When you look at Haiti, when you look at Bookman, when you look at Taki. So when you look at certain historical record, you will find that that is part of the folklore of the pirates of the Caribbean, the way they wrote it in, because no African wrote the history of the Caribbean. It was the enslaver, the pirates, that wrote it, isn't it? Yes, so there's certain things, my brother. You know, when you call someone, remember, it is said that the word maroon comes from Spanish. That means a wild man. How can a wild man defeat the British? And why would a man take on that name unless he betrayed? So instead of being called the Ashanti, right, that came out of the West Coast, they identified themselves as the Maroon. So, you know, look at the history and re-examine it.
So, in forms of, let's give the people a taster, because, you know, in the facts of when people always say that we are talking and we want to show some form of a little bit of action. We've said kind of most of what we need to say, but showing the people of what type of action that we can do for the future. As we have talked about the past and we have talked about the present, what can we actually show people or say to the people what we can actually do right now into that future?
Yeah. So did you want to go first, my brother?
No, my brother, I just spoke. And because you're so well knowledgeable, you know, I also want to hear you.
Absolutely. So what we have done is put together as a national organization who will plug straight into the diaspora region, all of the compartmentalized areas. So education, economics, health, justice, politics, housing, employment, trade and industry for business, which is international area, and media. So we've compartmentalized the areas. If anybody has an interest to join the organization, they can go to the website ADPAC.net and sign up an expression of interest. If they have a particular expertise, if they put what their expertise is in the reference and send us an email at info@adpac.net. Now, security is also one of those areas. And whenever we speak about this, sometimes people speak in a quite immature way, as if this is some kind of random act for hot-headed people. It's not. And security is one of our most serious aspects, like our spirituality is our strongest aspect that we never, or should I say, we rarely acknowledge. So they can contact us directly through the website. Now, me and Ras Ho-Shing are delivery partners. It just hasn't happened yet. Just like there are many of us as Pan-Africanists, But you see, the minute we have the contact, we start to share information and we start to align our programs. And this is very much a spiritual quickening that is bringing us together. And it is that spiritual shift that the planet has gone through that is attracting us to each other in an exponential way. So people would be surprised to know just how small the planet is and how many of us have actually connected hands. And I know there's 5 or 6 people of high caliber. I will know that you will know that we'll have in common. And so seamlessly when we come together, all it is a case of bringing those national expertise together. So anybody watching who has a desire to get involved, go to the website, and the minute that they connect with ADPAC, they've already connected with the diaspora region.
Let me quickly add to that, as Dean has said what he had to say, and I'm speaking on behalf of the women, especially, which is where we group a lot of the women together in forms of the, it's called ISC, the International Sister Circle, where you're getting all women from all different regions coming together and able to build in something through women in the fact of information, healing, and connecting into seeing how they can help other women across the board. And then we've got, as we call it, the manhood and womanhood academy for the children in forms of self-development, in forms of learning and understanding their cultures. So all these kind of things that we're all trying to do is to build that nation, to making sure that we have a legacy for our children. So, Brother Ras, now you can speak.
My brothers, everything you all said is all consistent. I, for myself, I want to encourage our brothers, go into your smartphone, look into the Ethiopian World Federation, have a fundamental knowledge of it, look into the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, what has now become the African Union. Knowing what is the failures of it presently is that we have weak leadership. And so long as you have weak leadership, which comes from the fact that our continent is still under constitution of different European Confederate states, from France, Germany, they all have their separate constitution that continue to undermine, right, the development of Africa. They undermine the unity and everything that is progressive within the continent. So I want us, as we are progressing, that our African leaders show us their position by finally declaring they discredit and abandon every constitution that was penned by the European that continued to enslave we, impoverish us, even from our own land. You know, that is a must. We can do that because, you know, what gave him the right to write a constitution that says he had the rights to everything in my land, even before I discover what is in my land? Who gave him that position? Exactly. No, God didn't give him that. So the same way that they did it, we can now abandon it, can't we? So that is one reality that we're now in. And when we speak of the African Union, the women that are now involved, we're seeing Sister Ya. I had a wonderful broadcast with her, and we see what she's doing in the Americas. We're seeing Dr. Arikana, our wonderful ambassador on the African continent, and we're seeing all the African women are coming together. We, the African men, the true African lions. What else are we supposed to do, my friend? What other courses there are for the African? I am one that I am not into seeking no apology for the sins that you have done. I am one that is not seeking reparation because you cannot pay me from what you owe me on what you continue to take from me. I am one that only see one solution: the returning of the African to his land. And that just as what you said, we don't need no dollar. We don't need no yen or no pound either, because we are able to declare a national currency. And we can do that. All our infrastructure and work that is needed to be done, we don't need no dollar to start the courses of it. And we know that within the diaspora, which equates to over 250 million in the diaspora, we know that just 1% of their contribution, right? We know that not paying France 500 billion each year, we know what we can be done. Do you know what we can do with 500 billion, my brother? Talking about turning the hub that will eventually turn the big wheel of Africa development, the great one that Marcus told us, that we Africans will create a greater civilization never seen before throughout period time of man, because we have the technology and we've been through all the atrocities, my brother. There's no nation that has been through what we've been through. So we do not seek either sympathy or charity, because we are still here, aren't we? We're still here. And the old people always used to sing a song, "We shall overcome someday." Well, that day is no longer someday, my brother. That day is today. Let us all stretch forth our hands from today. If we wasn't doing it before, let the real Africans stand up and be counted. The true liberators, both our security and our spirituality. That is where we are today, my brother. Action.
Brother Rich.
110%.
Brother Rich, are you there?
That's all. I'm just taking in, feeling the vibes and understanding the game plan that's being kicked. And again, please understand, the first resource of Africa is the people. It's you, yourself. Yeah, you're the #1 resource. So the first actionable change has to come with self. You understand? That's what these brothers are saying, in amongst other practical, real-time ways to
100%.
affect this action of repatriation. You understand? Like, if you don't understand that you're the first resource, because we can sit here, we can talk about gold, cobalt, the infinite amounts of wealth that our country has that we're talking about. But if you don't understand that simple fact that you're the first resource, then you will miss the trick and you won't realize what the white man is truly trading on every day, all day. Because what we're talking about at the time is illusionary, as the brothers say. These laws where they want us to jump through hoops to verify things that they've already put in place, these are illusionary tactics. And it's all to restrain and withhold your true potential as the #1 product from Africa. So always understand that. Always love what these brothers are doing. And go back, because since African Liberation's Day, it's been Black Eyes' mantra to push this repatriation message. And again, I've been proud that we've had a series of shows that have practically showed you how to do it. You understand how to do it? Step 1, step 2, step 3. And as my brother said, this isn't a joke thing. Things like security, things like peace of mind when doing these moves are a high state of priority when it comes to this, because we don't take moving house home lightly. It's not a big thing. You understand? It was already traumatic enough to be brought to these places. So when you're talking about repatriation, don't think that comes with an easy move. There has to be certain mindset changes. There has to be certain institutional changes. There has to be organizational changes. Yeah, so that's what we've tried to show. You know, I've enjoyed listening. My reception's been up and down today, so I haven't had the chance to speak so much. But again, the only thing I can say is the part of the media, all those people who are out there with channels, with media platforms. This is again another situation where we should be working together. When you're watching the news and you're watching the CNNs and the Fox News, they're working together. They're sharing footage. They're creating a narrative for you to buy into. So when we're talking about our own media situation and reflecting the game plan that we're talking about, we should be in one voice. We should be highlighting these brothers at one time. It shouldn't be bitsy. It should be one continuous stream so the message continuously gets out there. You understand? So again, big up to everybody coming in. If you haven't hit the like button, hit it again. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And if you haven't looked in the back catalog for those other shows with people like Sister Yar, Dean again, other people from our community talking about the different facets, I implore you, go and look. It's worth the effort. You understand? And right now, on lockdown, this is the best time to go into yourself and change. You understand? Go in while you're not being hassled to go out. Yeah, that's my message to the people then. So big up to the brothers for joining us. I'm going to let Riggsy take you out. Shout out to everybody that's joined us, everybody that's contributed in the chat room as always. I will say this, we are going to be going live again in a little while with another show where we're going to be touching base with some brothers and sisters from America.
It looks like his thing's gone. But on the back of that, what he was saying is that
a couple of the major cities.
Okay.
Can you still hear me, brothers?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. My signal dropped out. Yeah, so we're going to be coming back on in about an hour's time. So after this show, take a moment, take in what we've talked about. But again, rejoin us in an hour's time when we're going to come back and we're going to review that situation of what's going on again across the diaspora and what the general mind state should be when we're looking at this madness that's unfolding before our eyes. Who's motivating it? What's the reasons for it? And what do they want us to do? And what are we supposed to do? You understand? So come back, join us for that. Big up to my brothers again. This is another UK, USA, Caribbean, African link-up show. Yeah, big up to everybody. Go through, Riggsy.
Okay. As you heard from our brother there, and it's all about linking up and joining forces to becoming that one whole. As they always say, if we're all essence of the whole creator, all the essences coming together makes the creator. So it's something that to know how we need to come together and becoming that one whole, because that's the only time you're going to see the creator himself, when everybody is one. So in moving on, and as time is moving very quickly, I just want you to just give us a bit more on the ADPAC and how they can find ADPAC and how to find you, Dean, especially that we're going to be connecting with Ras. So in forms of us being one bond, it doesn't mean that they have to go fly to the next place, but they can just reach you to get into our counterparts in Jamaica, get into our counterparts in the US or the counterparts in Africa. So it's just one channel. We keep on connecting in that way because we're just one big family. And this is what we've got to understand. And I keep on emphasizing this with people, is that sometimes we have to take away language and landmass. When we take away that language and landmass, we now are one family. We're just engaging another family. And when two families come together, it quadruples. This is what we need to do. We're not different. We're all the same. Don't make anyone tell you that this one or that one is different or that one is different. Don't let anybody bring any forms of division, because that's what the system does. It divides us. So, Dean, if you'd like to say a few last words to the public and give your
yes, sir. So the first thing I want to do is I want to thank Black Eyes TV for their consistency. I want to thank Brother Rich and Mr. Riggs for what they do and the sacrifice they make to bring us this information. And not only that, but to bring the spirits together. We are one body complete, arm, leg, head, heart. And Brother Rich said something that was so pertinent in that we are the human resource. And I don't think we realize what we are as, if you look at us in the blood flow, Africans are the white blood cells. We actually clean the body of the world. And the problem with us being part of that blood flow is that as the heart that pumps the blood is only going in one direction. There's no reciprocal relationship. And this is why it's only a psychological fear. And this is the part that we have to fix in our reparation, that we don't need to rely on anybody else. We have every area of expertise, every area of profession at the highest echelons of what they do. They are all coming home. And if you feel that resonates with you, go and sign on the ADPAC website now, adpac.net. And as a fully sovereign and Pan-African organization, every single time we connect through any part of the body, you are connected to that part of the body. There is no separation. And as we start to align our databases and we start to align our technology and we're having a single line of communication, just like they do. That is exactly what they do with the European Union. This is what the African Union looks like. This is what the OAU looks like. And all of those little micro bodies like ADPAC do is contribute to the holistic body, arm, leg, head, God body, adpac.net. Oh, subscribe and like, and go back in the catalog, watch the videos and like and subscribe and share. Don't be selfish with the information.
No doubt, no doubt. Most important, share.
And our brother Ras, give us a powerful moment.
Well, my brother, I would like, once again, I want to thank you both for this opportunity. I'd like to thank my other brethren that is with us. I've enjoyed the exchange of your words and your knowledge. As for myself, I'm asking our people, look to Ethiopia, the Upper Kemet, the region that all faculty of knowledge, all our definition, economical revelation that came to us, our great priests and prophets, you know, the whole history of it, that is our history, right? We are the only one that fits the Holy Bible. So we know that with the redemption, salvation is within us because the greater one is in us. And we are now seeing the time of Africa unity. His Majesty has always been a champion of modernization of Africa. When we go into his teaching and philosophy, right, we are able to see the fundamental requirement, right, the spiritual strength that is needed for us to now overcome and for us to bring the continent with one aim, one God, one destiny. You know, it's one thing that Marcus have always said: Africans must have one aim, one God, one destiny. And we are now seeing that the opportunities, the full mark and signs that is necessary to empower us to accomplish what needs to be done, especially when we have the foundation that has been laid before us by many of our great patriarchs and our great matriarchs, our great liberators, our great intellectual minds, you know, from Marcus Mazai Garvey, right, His Imperial Majesty, and many of our great African leaders throughout the diaspora, right, Malcolm X, right, Martin Luther King, you know, all our African bloodline that shows a divine line to the full emancipation and the full recreation of Mother Africa. It is in our hands, my friend, and we are fully capable in order to fulfill our role that needs to be done at the dawn of the 21st century. So we have a golden future ahead of you, my brother, a golden one.
So thank you. All brothers, stay behind the back doors, because there's certain things we can't say in the forefront, but make sure you hit that website, ADPAC. It helps you hit Ras's website as well. We'll all be in the description box. Make sure you share, like, and subscribe. If there's any last words, Richie, before we go and come back again?
No, everything nice. Again, big up to everybody who joined us and is supporting and continues to support Black Eyes TV 7. Support the channel if you want to donate. The link is there. Understand the moves that Mr. Riggs is doing through New Beginning needs supporting as well. So the link is also there in the chat. So please support the moves that me and Mr. Riggs are doing, because this does take effort, it does take time, and it does take money. Yeah, so big up to everybody again for coming in. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. You know the routine. And come back in an hour where we're going to have the live conversation.
So spend black, be black, live black, love black, and always be black. Peace. And always be black.